Welcome back. I'm Melissa Harris-Perry. The Los Angeles Clippers faced the Golden State Warriors in last night's Game 7 of their first-round NBA playoff series. And despite the media circus still surrounding the team, the 3 seed persevered, winning by a score of 126-121. The win came hours after the NBA announced it would appoint a CEO to supervise the team, having banned this guy, the team's owner, still, Donald Sterling, whose audio-taped racial comments in a conversation with a woman who calls herself his personal assistant made him extra famous, or rather infamous, in the last 8 days. Their coach, Doc Rivers, expressed relief more than anything else after last night's victory.
I just thought this team really needed the game. I mean, honestly, I just wanted us to win the game. Not because of the, not winning last year. I just thought with all this stuff, this team just needed this win. For me, my excitement was not for me at all. It was for everybody. I wanted the fans to get excited. I mean, they were almost still sitting there in shock. And I just wanted them to get excited and exhale for a second.
This was a tumultuous week for the Clippers as they saw their owner hit with a $2.5 million fine and a lifetime ban from the National Basketball Association, as well as the likelihood that the other 29 league owners will try to force him to sell the team. Commissioner Adam Silver's strong stance has been widely lauded, but it would be a mistake to see his actions as his alone. This was a man reacting to significant external pressure. This wasn't so much a retort to Sterling's racist remarks as it was a reaction by a league that was being pressured into doing the absolute most it could do according to the NBA's constitution. Once the ban was handed down, the NBA asked the many sponsors who'd abandoned the Clippers, companies like Kia, Red Bull, State Farm, CarMax, Corona, Virgin America, to return after they'd jumped ship following social and mainstream media's explosion over Sterling's remarks. Some, like Red Bull, are quickly coming back, though the Clippers will be donating half of their postseason partnership profits to charity. But they just as responsible for this has been the great first round of the NBA playoffs. The players this far, the ones who got us here. The league's biggest star, LeBron James of the Miami Heat, made it clear that, quote, there is no room for Donald Sterling in our league. And even Charlotte Bobcats owner Michael Jordan, well known for not taking political stances during his Hall of Fame career, said this: I'm appalled that this type of ignorance still exists within our country and at the highest levels of our sports. In a league where the majority of players are African American, we cannot and must not tolerate discrimination at any level. You probably already know the Clippers themselves spoke with their actions, removing their team warm-ups prior to Game 4 of this playoff series, laying them down in unison at midcourt and warming up with their team T-shirts turned inside out so as not to display any logo. What you may not know is that the harsh penalty for Sterling headed off what could have been a dramatic and historic protest. It was going to come from the Clippers' opponents, the Golden State Warriors. Marcus Thompson of the San Jose Mercury News reported that the plan was to go through the pregame festivities Tuesday night, take the floor for the opening tip, dap the Clippers starters as is customary, get in position for the jump ball, and as soon as it was tossed, point guard Stephen Curry said his team was going to walk off the floor in protest. All of them. Curry told Thompson that it would have been their only chance to make a statement in front of the biggest audience that they weren't going to accept anything but the maximum punishment. And that's pretty much what Sterling got. The players took a stand, and it paid off. It was, you could say, a full-court press. Joining me now, Jamel Hill, the co-host of ESPN's Numbers Never Lie and the His and Hers podcast. Michael Skolnik, political director for Russell Simmons and editor-in-chief of globalgrind.com. Christina Beltran, associate professor of social and cultural analysis at New York University. And Swin Cash, who is on the executive committee for the WNBA Players Union. She's a former NCAA and WNBA champion basketball player, most recently of the Chicago Sky, and fairly recently of Nerdland, where you suggested some folks could take multiple seats.
We have a few seats open right now.
And I was wondering who you thought might should maybe take a seat this week.
We can add Donald Sterling.
Yes.
Over there to take one. Sure.
But so do you think we should be largely applauding these players and former players for taking such a strong stance in this moment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know at the beginning people wanted them to make a rush decision and to jump right in there. when this all came out. But you really need to digest everything. I thought the players did an excellent job because what they did first was take the leadership, not only from Doc Rivers, but also from Chris Paul. They got together, they came together, made a decision, and then they just ran with it. And that's what I like about the players. They didn't just act hastily. They actually took the time to really think about everything.
Were you surprised, Jamel, that these players took such a clear, and so many, and Michael Jordan had something to say in this moment?
Yeah, that's shocking. I mean, I gotta say, if you know you're considered a racist when A, you dislike Magic Johnson, and B, you get Michael Jordan to speak out, right, and you know it's real, okay? But there's a part of me, and I don't know if this is being selfish, I kind of wanted to see them do it. Even though Adam Silver responded in the harsh way that they all wanted him to, I wanted to see that historic moment happen because I think for so long, especially today's athlete, they've been criticized for being desensitized because of the amount of money they make, for their position and their platform, all the things that people like Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali fought for. They have reaped all those benefits, and rarely have we seen the kind of forced action that we used to see from some of the past civil rights heroes. So personally, I wanted to see him go through with it.
All right, so because the point that you made here, and some of the folks that you have invoked, Muhammad Ali and his position particularly against the war in Vietnam. We can go back to John Carlos and Tommy Smith in 1968, standing there on the Olympic podium with their fists raised. But they were not critiquing a racial moment within their sports. They were critiquing a racial environment more broadly. I love what the players did, but does it count as being part of that tradition?
You know, I think yes and no. I mean, in one sense, what they did was, you know, you talked about this yesterday on the show. Americans like simple racial narratives, and we like our racists to wear black hats, right? And Sterling filled that role completely. And so there's a way in which this was a kind of, I don't want to say an easy move, but it was a move in which, you know, saying this guy is racist in a world as divided, in America as divided as ours is, this is a moment where you can speak out against racism and you're not going to get any disagreement on it. So it's a kind of moment that, you know, it was important, it was powerful, but it's hard to know. I mean, there's really complicated issues here. These are people who might become activists at some point, but they're also a commodity. They're a brand. They're trying to leverage that brand. They're trying to make sense of what makes sense for them in the long term with endorsements. So the question to me that's really interesting is who at this moment now is going to consider themselves an activist in a new way? What players are going to say this is the first step in making the situation better, and which folks are going to see this as kind of a one-off moment that was, in some sense, the whole political climate supported them.
So because we did see some players, we saw LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and others come out in the moment, for example, of the Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman verdict. And in that moment, we saw some folks who were stepping outside of questions of race within their league and were saying something about what was being read as a racial moment more broadly. Do you think this is a moment that activates some of those players?
Well, I got to give a tremendous amount of credit to LeBron. I think that man has shown unbelievable leadership amongst men in that league, not just with Trayvon, but even before, as the king, right? King James, when Michael was the king of the league, Michael was silent. And as LeBron, day one, Jordan came out the next day on Donald Sterling. You know, LeBron
We're just going in on Jordan today.
Day one. And I got to give him a tremendous amount of credit. But I think also as a society, we can't look to these men and women in sport to solve our problems of racism, right? If we point two fingers at Donald Sterling, let's not forget that these conversations that are happening amongst white men in closed doors are not uncommon. I am not surprised by what Donald Sterling said. I'm disgusted by what he said. But this is happening in boardrooms, in executive offices, on the street with our friends. And we as a society have to solve those problems and not just look to LeBron or D. Wade or Chris Paul to do that for us.
All right, so when you said two things I want to put a finger on. So one is about women athletes, and I'm wondering if there are any kinds of differences, particularly around the commoditization. Because of the commoditization of male athletes, whether or not women athletes might actually be able to be for us a space where more of this could happen, or if in fact they're even more vulnerable because there is not as much money in it, because losing that job is even more marginal.
Talking to somebody going through
contract negotiations, right?
My own
Exactly.
issues right now. But you know, I can say this: for a woman, there's levels to it. It's not only racism; at times it's sexism. I want to just go to that point as well about speaking up. LeBron did that; he showed great leadership. But you have to understand too that these players, like I talked to some of the guys on the phone, they were ready to go. But what it is you want to get all the facts. And and they had a lot of trust and respect for Adam Silver. They wanted to give him a little bit of a line to see where he was going to stand. Once he made that stand, trust me, if he didn't make the stand that he made, those players were not going to play. And for women, if it happened in our league, WNBA, it'd be the same way. We supported our brothers completely through this time right now, and it's not done. It's far from done. Because what happened with Donald Sterling is this. He said something that was like a surgeon cutting you without the anesthesia. You know, like he was like that boss that you never hear these things. I mean, you hear racism all the time, like you said, on the streets and stuff. But when you hear it from the top, from a boss, that's when it really cuts deep.
All right. So part of then, so women athletes is one. The other part of what you said is about, and you as well, everybody being part of it. Unanimity among white players as well. And I think, you know, we might just go, well, of course. I mean, it's a team, you know, dominated by African Americans. What were the white guys going to do? But after what we saw with Incognito and Martin in the NFL this year, I think we can be over any sort of romantic notion that because guys are playing together, they are necessarily all in racial harmony. Is there something valuable to be taken from the fact that white players were also apparently completely appalled by what happened with Sterling?
I think that is valuable. And in fact, I think, and I hate to say this, it almost lends more credibility to the movement overall. I certainly noticed that when Kevin Johnson spoke, that Steve Nash was right behind him. And then I hate to say it, my first thought was, what's Steve Nash doing there? But, you know, I understand he's also very active sort of politically. But just to kind of get back to something both of you guys said about how this may or may not activate the players, and I wrote about this, what I want to know is, are they capable of sustained anger? Because as Swin said, this is not over, okay? Donald Sterling may very well be the owner as when the new season begins in 2014. So what are you going to do now? Like you said, Christina, it's very convenient to take a stand when you have everybody else with you. It's much harder when you're on that alone. And then there's going to be more at stake. Then you're talking about more games. Then you're talking about jeopardizing a whole season. Then you're talking about a whole league. So I think personally, boycotting should very much still be on the table for them.
And then you're talking about real union politics, too.
Yeah.
Union and solidarity. And that's a group of people who can be workers and celebrities. That's an amazing combination, right? To be a solidarity
Christine,
group of workers.
hold that, because that's exactly where we're going to go. I got a few things to say, but then we're going to come back, and I want to go to exactly that union question, which is what you and I have been talking about previously, and whether or not this could even mean something ultimately for whether or not college players might ever be able to take these kinds of stances. Everybody stay with me. When we come back, I'm going to show you how Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid weighed in on this Clipper story this week and how he took it to a whole nother city.
These events remind all of us that hatred and bigotry are far from over. I hope that every bigot in this country sees what happened to Mr. Sterling and recognizes that if he can fall, so can you.